We all know about the benefits of wine, especially red wine. But what about whiskey? Is there any benefit at all? This is what we're talking about today. Hey, welcome back to Whiskey Gal. Thanks for joining me again. If you haven't checked out my other videos, I like to go through the basics of what whiskey is, especially single malt whiskey. I give you some history and fun details. Also just give you that information that you need to get into that world of whiskey and make it as approachable as possible. When you search whiskey and health benefits online, you get some rather interesting results, or at least I did. The roots of whiskey's purported medical benefits stretch back to post-medieval Scotland. The Middle Ages was a horrible time to get ill. If you've done any research about that time, it was just a very dirty time. There's a lot of ailments going around because they had lived in very poor houses and poor sanitary conditions. Even getting a little cut would be the end of your life right there because it can get infected and then it turns septic. And that was it. So it was a pretty dangerous time. Medieval medicine had not advanced further than the theories from the Greek physician Galen. He practiced 1,000 years earlier during the Roman Empire. So really, there wasn't a huge advancement between that time. Now, if you're unaware, his theory is that when a person became ill, it was because one of their four humors became unbalanced. The four humors, according to Galen, was black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. This theory lasted for 1,500 years in the European medicine. And the only real treatments at the time were herbal remedies, bleeding and purging, and of course, supernatural cures. Monasteries of the time had setups for a hospital. And of course, they had the greatest herb gardens as well to make up some of those herbal remedies. It was also the ideal environment for the development of whiskey and medicine. Not only did they have access to, of course, the cleanest water and grain from ties, but they had manpower and a lot of time on their hands as well, for they didn't need to go out and work. Whiskey, or aquavita, became a popular ingredient in medicinal cocktails due to the belief of its many benefits. Now, there are medical manuscripts from back in the 15th century with actual herbal remedies written down. So one of them states here that I'm going to have to read for you, otherwise I won't remember it. Now, it says here, now this is a fun one. They get really ridiculous after a while, but this one is interesting. It reads, "For deafness, take the bile of a hare with aquavita and the milk of a woman's breast in the same quantity and mix it well together and put it in the ear." I dare you to try that. They get pretty ridiculous and very fascinating to read too. It's definitely worth a look up. In the 16th century Scotland, apothecaries sold whiskey as a tonic to slow aging, cure congestion, and relieve joint pain. And even jumping further into the American Prohibition, doctors prescribed whiskey for treating pneumonia, high blood pressure, and tuberculosis. So now, of course, we're going to have to ask ourselves, what is the actual benefit for today's standards? We have a lot more regulations now, accordingly. Now, you can still have a nice hot toddy if you want for when you're having a cold, and there is actually some benefit to that. Now, let's look into some of the more interesting ones and the ones that stand out more to me. According to multiple studies, a glass of whiskey a day can help reduce the risk of heart disease and heart failure. Research also shows that it can help fight cancer, but of course, don't use it for the only cure. Also, whiskey contains very little sodium and no fat, and it only has simple sugars which digest very easily in the body. So this can actually promote weight loss. Now, moderate beer drinkers tend to actually lose muscle tone, and of course, then they increase their beer gut. Now, but switching to whiskey, you can actually lose some of that weight and still have a good time. According to a study, whiskey has also been shown to reduce the risk of diabetes by 40%. A moderate amount of whiskey can help improve the body's ability to regulate insulin and glucose levels. One study that was most interesting to me was the fact that they show that if a person had 1 to 6 drinks a week, that actually helped lower the risk for dementia. Another study shows that a moderate amount of alcohol can actually reduce cognitive decline in people with Alzheimer's disease. The main one that we're usually aware of is, of course, taking whiskey for a cold in the form of a hot toddy. Now, hot toddies are great, but they don't actually affect the cold directly. It's more of an indirect. What happens is actually it widens the blood vessels, allowing for the congestion to clear, and so your body can heal at a faster rate. So that's what it's actually doing. And the one that we could probably use more often than anything else is the fact that if you have a higher ABV or higher proof whiskey, you can use it as a digestive aid. So if you, after a really large meal and you're feeling really full and bloated, having a bit of whiskey can actually stimulate the stomach's enzymes to help you start digesting faster and getting rid of that really full bloated feeling. So it can be really useful, and I think I'm probably going to start using that for sure myself. Now, it is worth saying that, of course, everything in moderation, and that if you go to the opposite end of this and just start drinking all the time, you'll definitely not have any benefits from it, and it will hurt you in the end. So just be careful with your drinking. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Now I'm going to be drinking a good 16-year-old Lagavulin, and a friend of mine gave me some of his. It's my absolute favorite. I'll see you next week. Cheers.